electronic identities has to be expressed in some sort of way. And attributes is at the core of the business here. So attributes are the data fields that are being transported back and forth. It's about the user. And let's see what attributes are, what they look like, and how they can be used. So here are some data fields. There's one called David, there's one called Simonsen, that's me. There's something about my phone number, there's something about my email address, and you can imagine many, many more things that you want to express about me as a user, affiliation and so forth. So these attributes are the pieces of data which is being handled by the Identity Federation, information about me. What has to work when you set up such a system is, of course, a standardized way of naming these attributes, so we can actually, both issue and receive standardized information. So we have to keep up with international standards to ensure that this will also work in other contexts. We cannot just find out or invent a naming of our own. And then, now this is more tricky, the meaning of these attributes, there we have to be careful, because what does it mean to be member of staff compared to be member of employee is highly different in different countries, for instance, or in different sectors. So the Identity Federation as such has to be very clear about what is the meaning of these attributes. Christian name is not so hard, family name is not so hard, but stuff like staff, employee, student, for instance. What is a student? Is it a master student, a PhD student, exchange student, and so forth? It might have different meanings in different contexts. So that's a complex field to get into. Now this is the list of attributes supported by wayf, and it's not very long compared to many other identity federations, but we keep a short list that grows use case by use case. So if you have a need for an attribute to be expressed to a service provider or received from an identity provider, you may call us and we will add to this list the needed attributes, but only if there's a real need. We can express many things. We can express email addresses, organizational nicknames, we can express your social security number, we can express the level of assurance, what type of authentication mechanism you use to log in, and so forth. Think about the simple principle of letting personal information about you going from one administrative security domain, which is the blue one, to another, the red one here. This is what it's all about. We have to move information in the form of attributes from one place to another. We do this using, to do this in a more easy way, we have defined attribute release profiles. So a release profile is the amount of data which will be issued to a service provider each time you try to access it. And you should never reveal more about yourself than really necessary. So we have, a basic principle of minimal disclosure, and this means that we find out what the purpose of the service is, and then we negotiate based on these suggested profiles what information to issue about the user. You might want to be able to recognize the user and don't know who the user really is, identify the user, or you might need to identify, even with a social security number perhaps, who the user is. So attribute release profiles in the setup of wayf is defined centrally at the federated hub. In the full meshed identity federation, it may be suggested by the federation operator what to send or issue to what service providers, but actually it's up to each identity provider to define what kind of release policy they want to have. Now, there's a question of negotiation power here. Being a central hub with all the users, hundreds of thousands or millions of users behind you, puts you in a much stronger position when negotiating what information to send over to services. And this is one important aspect of the differences between these architectures here. So we can, with a central hub, we can negotiate quite powerfully the attribute release profiles. And we make one for each service. So here we have the hub in the middle and services to the left, and they have different attribute release profiles because they're different services with different purposes. But it's one size fits all. Institution 1 cannot come along and say, we would like to issue more information to service Y. That is defined by contract by the federation operator, and it's actually written on paper and signed by the services that this is the purpose and this is the attribute release profile that we agreed upon. If they want to change it for some reason later, we can do that, but then we have to restart the whole process again. It's not very complicated, but it has to be on paper. Now, one more thing about all of this is how to express these attributes. You can do it in a machine-readable format, which is called OIDs, or you can use a more human-readable notation called URINs. It's a matter of taste. The international trend is that we go for OIDs, and that's a simple decision that was made. And then it's just important to be sure that you know that you have to follow this standard. Now the meaning, as I mentioned before, is actually very, very hard to standardize. And there you have to make sure that you and the service provider actually understand the same thing about the same issue, the same attributes. Having a hub in the middle, the federating hub, the wayf here in the middle, provides you with some good things in terms of security. You may actually know where the information originated from, and therefore a set or a calculated attribute is an attribute which is provided by the central federating hub. In this case we have one called shack home organization, and this is an attribute that tells the name of the institution or identity provider that you logged in at. Now if the institution could itself issue this attribute, they could also spoof to be someone else or originating from somewhere else. And therefore we have a security feature here by letting the federation operator express where the data originated from. We may do verification services in the sense that we can have an attribute called shack year of birth, which is a deducted value. So you get in a social security number, for instance, which you do not want to reveal, but you can deduct the year of birth of that person, which is far less dangerous, so to speak, to issue or hand over to services. The federation hub can do that, and thereby we can generate more fine-grained pictures of what the users are and who they are and how old they are than we would be able to do with the raw material received from the identity provider. Or we may generate an attribute like EduPerson targeted ID, which is a pseudonym, and you can see what pseudonyms are used for in one of the other presentations on this site. The shack home organization, as I mentioned, is simply just a statement about where the data came from. Very useful in many contexts and highly used by many service providers. The shack year of birth, here you see the social security number and the derived year of birth. Very easy. And you can take another one. You can just pass it on if actually the identity provider send over year of birth. So we can either look for information in existing attributes and extract details, or we can just pass on. Age verification is a hot topic. Not very many implement anything, but we can verify all the kind of attributes that the Identity Federation supports. So we can verify year of birth, email address, Christian name, family name, where you came from and all of that. And you can use that in, for instance, chat rooms or e-learning management systems or wherever you want to have people verifying their information.